Good evening and welcome to the Pride Alliance of New York State Courts. I am Mary Smith, a senior court clerk assigned to Bronx Housing, where I have the privilege and honor of working with Judge Jennings and also Judge Garland. The goal of the Alliance is to make the court system a more welcoming place for all, especially for the LGBTQIA plus individuals. Our organization consists of former and present court employees and their allies. We're dedicated to protecting the rights of and standing with those who encounter discrimination based on their sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. We are proud to welcome the Honorable Norma Jennings and her spouse, the Honorable Juliet Howard, who are the first married same-sex couple serving in the same court in New York State. Let me welcome Mr. Louis Speak Tanner, the president of the Alliance, who will lead the conversation tonight with our guests.
So welcome everyone, and I see we have Judge Mendelson with us tonight, as well as several other judges. So welcome everyone to our event this evening, and it's a privilege. Thank you both Judge Jennings and Judge Howard for being here for our first Pride Alliance event. We were reconstituted as a Pride Alliance from the Gay Straight Alliance that had existed many years ago. So I think I introduced myself to some of you. My name is Louis Speaks Tanner, and I use the pronouns he, his, and him. And I work I'm a court, senior court clerk in New York County Supreme Court. So I know that both of you work in the two busiest courts and housing courts. And I've had the privilege of starting my career actually in Bronx housing. And I know how busy that court is on a daily basis. So you are probably two of the harder working judges in the system on a daily basis of lots of litigants coming through. So, but why don't we start with talking about how you got, your career path and how you got started in law.
All right, first I wanted to say thank you for inviting us. Second, I'm glad to see the Alliance formed again, because I was part of the initial Pride Alliance. So I'm glad to see it back. And of course, anything that we can do to help, we will help in any way we can. So, well, initial path, I think I've always sort of wanted to be an attorney. And then I worked at Legal Aid. That's where we met, the Legal Aid Society. Mm-hmm. And then when we decided to have children, we wanted to sort of have a more steady job, better benefits, and the ability to be involved with our children's lives. So that's one of the things that, one of the reasons why we came into the court system. And, it's been a great experience. We've gotten so much support from everyone in the court system. And, when our children got older, that's when we decided to apply to become judges.
Absolutely. Thanks. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Okay. And we should probably talk about, I don't know how old you are. I'm going to say how old I am. I'm 57. And, so I kind of started I was born before Stonewall happened in 69. So it's been 51 years of lots of history. And of course, now we're uncovering that, the history and the movement started before Stonewall in the 50s, and people could say it even further, those pioneers that were around earlier. But, we're coming up on the 10th anniversary of marriage equality in the state of New York. It was signed on June 24th, passed by the Senate, and signed that same day, June 24th, 2011. 2011. And then the first marriages on July 11th of 2011. excuse me. So, I mean, that was a monumental event that happened. Were you a part of that event, or working, helping to work towards that?
I'm not specifically part of that event, but definitely something that we certainly were supportive of. And we've obviously been together before. Marriage between same-sex couples was even legal. We've been together for 27 years now. So it's definitely something that we've sort of been rooting for, very supportive of. We were happy to hear that when that finally happened. And when we were happy, of course, to finally get the chance to marry and to be legally recognized, in New York. I think it was really important for our two sons as well to be able to see that when we finally had the chance to get married, even though they, completely knew that we were a family. We've been out for, the whole entire time that we've been together. But it is important to be able to sort of have that legal acknowledgement as well.
Right.
I'll just add, because I was more political before I became a judge. I was way more political than Juliet. So I was part of Stonewall Democrats. I was part of Independent Democrats in Brooklyn. And Lambda Democrats in Brooklyn as well. So we were very much involved. I was very much involved in the political aspect of marriage equality and getting marriage equality passed. So, that's the only thing about drawback I see about becoming a judge, is someone who is very much into politics like I am. That's not something you can do any longer. So.
Yeah, I can imagine. I sort of like to be involved in politics and that, and being a political junkie. But that was a monumental occasion. But looking back even 30 years ago, probably when the two of you, started your careers or met, marriage didn't even seem possible on the horizon. Were you out at work?
Yes, always out. I've been out since I was 18, so I went to Barnard and I came out then. I was out when we met at Legal Aid, and we were out pretty, early on once we became a couple many years ago.
So, and how was that experience in New York City? Because I know that I had, graduated from college and lived in New Jersey, doing retail, and being out in retail, especially in a hardware type store, wasn't the easiest thing to do, because I remember, walking into one of the stock rooms and seeing, graffiti on the wall, saying, I'm gay and other type of things. So, but in New York City, I'm sure it was hopefully a little bit easier, but how was that for you guys?
I mean, Legal Aid was progressive, so
Yeah.
it was okay there. I mean, the community in Brooklyn at that point was big but small, so everybody sort of knew each other. And at that point, we were one of the first couples to, decide to have children, and then a lot of our friends decided to have children, which is now, everyone is. It's not, I would say it's more of what's happening now, of couples having children. So back then, there was like a group of people, we were all friends, and we were all able to kind of support each other in every way, work, home. So New York was much more comfortable, of course, coming out and being out.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I think we did have challenges. I remember when our first son was born, our oldest son is 23, our youngest son is 16. And so I do definitely remember in school, that was really an issue, that a lot of the schools had a hard time sort of, not I'm gonna say hard time, but they just couldn't wrap their minds the fact that he had two moms. They would assume one was a stepmother, that they weren't both, moms together. And a lot of kids would sort of tease him or tell him there's no way you can have two moms. So I also remember him being a really early advocate for our family, which, sort of is something that he ended up growing up to be very much an advocate, an LGBT advocate as well, and started at a young age.
Okay, that's great, but it's unfortunate that he did experience that kind of discrimination or harassment. And so how, excuse me, when you started in law, did you have any role models that you saw, or just in general role models that you use to say, gee, this is something I can obtain?
Right, right. Well, what happens is I always say, I think Norm and I both say our parents were our role models. Both of us were raised by single moms. So my mom was definitely a big role model as a single mom. She only went to high school, but definitely encouraged education. But she also actually worked in the court system. She worked as a court assistant, and then she moved on to become a court clerk. So I literally sort of grew up in the court system, going to the court. And I know that she sort of almost, I realized it as I got older. I didn't know at the time, I was just a little kid. But she would take me to the court, and she would take me to the courtrooms. And she always made sure that I met, any African American or judges of color that I could meet, just to speak to them, let me sit in the courtroom, let me observe, even though I was fairly young. And so I think that probably definitely did have an impact on me, kind of having those conversations at a young age about justice and the changes that could happen, in a courthouse. So I definitely see her, and then her exposing me early on to the courthouse as something that influenced me.
I think for me, and I always say my mother has been and will always be my role model. My mom, she passed away a couple of years ago. She was 96 years old. She grew up in the South, in the Jim Crow South, and she came up here. She came up north at a very early age. She was only a teenager when she came up here, and she worked hard, and she never complained. She worked very hard to raise me. I'm the youngest of, Julia and I come from very different backgrounds. She's the only child. I'm the youngest of 7 children. And I was raised by like she said, a single mother. So, my mother always showed me hard work. She wasn't able to go to school, so it was very important for us to get an education. And she, she worked very hard until she retired when she was 62 years old. She worked at she was a correctional officer at the Passaic County Jail in New Jersey. I grew up in New Jersey. So like I said, she's always been my idol, and she always will be my role model.
Did you have any LGBT role models growing up?
Well, I grew up in the projects, so in Patterson, New Jersey. It wasn't something that, was out especially in the African American community. It wasn't something that, people were out at that time, growing up in where I grew up. So I didn't really see or have any LGBTQIA role models. It's something that happened when I came to New York. I went to Columbia. So that's where I saw, and being in New York, that's where I saw people from the LGBTQ community out. And that's when I sort of felt free enough to come out.
Right. And for me, I think because I went to Barnard, so I was exposed to a lot of, sort of women-centered politics and women-centered writing. And I'm also a writer as well as a judge now. So Audre Lorde, those are like big influences on me. Those writers like herself, and there's another writer, Pat Parker. And they were very much, Black lesbian activists, and really encouraged me to come out when I was about 18, because I had sort of read their work, and I was like, okay, if you can live out loud and proud like this, so can I. So I definitely had those as kind of early role models, and I still turn to their work because it's very powerful.
Well, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I know some of the role models, they weren't as plentiful back then as they are now, and you had to be in the know to know some of the people, and knew from circles of who's who back even in the 80s, especially in the 80s and earlier. So, but that's great. What was your the path to becoming a judge? I mean, you both were in legal aid, and then you wanted to be more stable in a career. How were you able to jump from the legal aid into becoming a judge?
I'll go first. Well, my path was always definitely, sort of public interest, working with the public. Legal aid was my first job. Like we met, it was right out of soon after law school. After that, then I moved on to Brooklyn Law School. Used to have something called the Elder Law Clinic. And so I had a chance to teach there and work with, elderly clients. And a lot of it was sort of housing based. So I sort of continued that interest and passion about housing, and still working with, community and serving the public. And then that's when I became the next job after that was when I became a court attorney in housing court. and ended up staying there, sort of many years. That's where I was most recently before I became a judge. Been about 3.5 months now that I've been on the bench. And just really loving working with the public, being able to sort of, make that difference by being in that type of position. And being a judge is definitely something that I had thought about, for a while, but like Norma said, we both made decisions to really focus on our sons and raising our 2 sons over the years. They're now, older. Like I said, the youngest is 16 and definitely more independent. In a year or so, he'll probably be going away to, college, God willing. And so, as that happened in our life, I felt that we both had the time to really dedicate to being on the bench. And then Norma was the one who applied first to be a housing court judge. She was going to tell her path.
Yeah, my path is pretty similar.
Right?
We met at Legal Aid, and then after Legal Aid, I left there. I went to GMHC, which was, a wonderful job. It was one of my, favorite places to work. But of course, it was big on funding. So at that point, the legal department was small, and the funding was not great for the legal department. So our son we were having the oldest. So I wanted something, again, more steady, something where you didn't have to depend upon funding coming in, and of course, medical coverage. So that's when I applied to become a court attorney. That's when Judge Kay started the initiative. It was in 1997. And so she pretty much doubled the staff of court attorneys for housing court because housing court was so busy. And so, like Juliet said, the path to becoming a judge is pretty much you're a court attorney and you apply. You go through a screening process. You go through you go through the advisory council, then you go to the city bar. And then if you make it through there, then you, at the time, it's Judge Canatero, who just became who just got appointed to the Court of Appeals. So if they selected you, then then you became a housing court judge. But I had applied a long time ago, and then I didn't try again because I wanted to be involved in children and raising of the children. I don't regret it at all. I went to every class trip. I went to every parent-teacher conference. I went to everything that they had at their school. So you can't replace things like that. So that's something that I wanted to do. And then I decided I was going to put the application in, and I got the job.
Well, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, you can't replace that, being there for your children. Unfortunately, I was a little bit older when, I found my spouse now. And so children just didn't make it into the equation at all. It would have been nice, but I've, nieces and he has nieces, so we have family, but it's quite changed when we think about way back when 30 years ago. Raising a family wasn't always on the horizon, or it wasn't easy to do that. So, but very good, very good. Now, Judge Howard, you said you do some writing, and I believe have you done some more fiction and poetry?
Poetry primarily. Yes, I'm a poet primarily, and also writing a bit of fiction as well now.
Okay,
yes.
But then I think I saw something for you just got an award from your alma mater. And I think I saw that you had done some writing for the court system.
Not so much. Not so much for the court system. Like I said, my poetry, which is
okay,
writing that I've done for the court system. I mean, I was on.
Oh, you co-facilitated a workshop, or right? Was it a workshop or?
I mean, I know in the courts, I've very much in terms of implicit bias and issues of the LGBT community, that's something that I've done, in the court system. And I hope to do it now as a judge. I did it when I was a court attorney, maybe about 2 years ago. And that was something I helped to facilitate that. It was a CLE for judges and for court attorneys talking about implicit bias in the courthouse and which I think is just something that's an important topic to talk about the treatment of the LGBT community, whether it be litigants or even whether it be, fellow court staff, and sort of being able to talk to judges and court attorneys about, how do we deal with folks? How do you make sure that people have their preferred pronouns, that people are really being heard, that you're respecting everyone who comes before you? So that, yeah, that is a CLE that I help to co-facilitate.
Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, because bias is very much in the court system that we're focused on. And it's amazing that we have a lot more LGBT judges that are there as role models. But as far as employees at times, those, me going through the court system for the last 5 years, looking for other LGBT employees has been a lot harder than for me to find out to seek. So, I mean, I'm glad that's why the Pride Alliance exists, and it's hard to get people to maybe join or to know that it exists, because I think there is some more bias in the system. Lower down in the ranks. Have you experienced any bias within the court system?
I haven't personally experienced it, but I've absolutely, certainly, seen it in action, by, sadly, by fellow, colleagues. And so I think it is important to kind of, call it out to the extent, that we can, and to educate people, our own colleagues. And I'm happy that, the Pride Alliance exists so that people who may not feel safe have a safe place to come, because I think I can see how that could happen. There could be, like I said, I've been out, so I can't almost imagine not being out. But I know that there are a lot of people who are, and I can understand that, that they're dealing with, trans and homophobia, and so it's important to be able to have, a space like this where they can, you can come and meet, and hopefully at some point get back to, in-person meetings, But this is wonderful.
Yeah.
To even have the ability to bring people together like this, virtually. But it definitely exists. I mean, I don't know Norma's experience, but I definitely exist. Those,
I mean, I think you have to approach it. It's happened, not to me personally, but it's happened in my courtroom, and you have to, and it's always a touchy subject, especially with your colleagues, to talk about it. But I think you have to address it if it happens. I think for me, it's very important for the trans community when they come into the courtroom to feel comfortable, and to ask them, what is your preferred pronoun? How do you want us to approach you? How do you want us to call you out? Because the trans community, when you look at the file, I mean, there's not files, most of them are not files anymore, but so we're going electronic. But if you look at the file and the name doesn't match, then to the person, then you need to sort of say, how do you want me to address you? Because your name on here is not the name that you're using. So, I mean, I've seen it done, and I've done it to a trans person that came into the courtroom. For me, it's very important for them to feel comfortable to come in and to ask them.
Right. And to educate folks around us who may not know that. Because I think a lot of times, it has to do with education as well, And so maybe calling out to, in a professional way, to let the court officer know this person, even though they never got their name changed. That's a lot of issues sometimes. People haven't had their legal name changed, so that you may see a name that does not necessarily reflect the person who's before you. And so if this person says, I go by Mr. So-and-so, to, kind of let staff know this is what they want to be called, and we need to all respect that. And so I think you also kind of show by example, right? You lead by example, as part of it as well.
Right, because it's our trans siblings or friends, or just court users who I think have the hardest time in the court system. I know that the commission, the Richard C. Fayea LGBT Commission has been instrumental in having restroom signs put up in courthouses across the state, but I don't know if that's totally consistent. And, I know I've had some conversation with just colleagues, and some people get upset. I don't want, someone who's trans going into my restroom, and those conversations, you know, as many times as you kind of envision what they are, when you actually have it, it's hard to stay to the script or to remember all the very important points to make, so that we can keep everyone more comfortable, but allow the trans folks to actually use the restroom that they feel comfortable with.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. You know, I think it's so, you know, it's so important.
That's a work that really needs to be done. I mean, we have a
And
lot to do on
Yeah,
that.
definitely a lot of work to be done on that. I agree.
yeah, and that's probably, you know, definitely a conversation, you know, a larger conversation, you know, the LGBT implicit bias, and how do we as a whole court community deal with that, and really look at how we treat each other.
That's right. Yeah, maybe that could be a future topic, you know, for one of the
Uh,
part, you know,
Absolutely.
work with it, you know, work with you on it. I wouldn't mind at all.
Yeah. You know, but yeah, there's just been a lot of, you know, and it's been more quiet. I mean, you know, the press has focused more on what's been happening, you know, bias against Asian people who present themselves as Asian, certainly people who present themselves as African American, and but there hasn't been a lot of media coverage on the LGBT crimes recently, or maybe they've actually gone down, but I don't believe that as a society in general.
I don't believe. I mean, I
don't
think
think
we've
so.
always there's
Mhm.
never been the appropriate coverage for especially the trans community of color, where we've had, you know, people have been murdered. So I think that's always been the issue that
Right.
really hasn't been talked about,
Right.
and there hasn't been a focus on that.
Right. I agree.
On the
Right.
death at
I
all.
don't think the numbers have gone down, you know, sadly.
No, especially for trans. I mean, I think this is a record number so far. Last year, it might have been like 27 people, but they've already had 27 confirmed murders this year. We are with trans folk
Right.
being murdered.
Right.
Um,
We're only in
part of
early,
it
right.
part of it is better coverage, because I think the numbers have always been suppressed because either families don't want to talk about that. I mean, certainly programs like Pose, you know, brings out more visibility and lets more people see the diversity of the whole rainbow and in our community.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's true.
So, does anyone else have any questions for our panelists? You can put them in the chat box if you don't want to chat or speak. Do you have any questions that you want to raise about the Pride Alliance, or you know, even ask me a question about my experience?
Yeah.
I think Denise might have a question.
Question,
She's
maybe?
trying to figure out how to unmute herself.
I'm not as progressive as Lewis with this computer, but I'm getting there.
Okay. Did you have a question, Denise?
Yeah, I would love to ask. I know that originally we were we wanted to speak with the judges about how the bias in the courts has progressed, and do you see a big change from when you first started, because you've been in the courts for so long, from now? I mean, obviously there has been some changes, you know, like worldwide, and obviously we're getting more attention, and so I think that's a great thing, especially with the trans community, because they do suffer a lot, as far as, you know, like you said, there's already 27 deaths. So how do you feel about that? I know that you've been in a legal aid society, which is progressive, which is great, when you started out there, but how has it gotten better, and also for you, in the last 20 some odd years since you've been since you've been in the courts?
I think for the court system, from the beginning, it was not talked about, like the trans community was not talked about, bias wasn't talked about. And I think the movement just in the last few years to just even have a workshop or a discussion on implicit bias and how the trans community is affected in the courthouse is some movement, but I think that we still have a long way to go because I think it's just still not something that's talked about a lot. And I think the Pride Alliance would help, and the commission would help as well. I see, Matthew Skinner's here, so that would help as well, just to have a conversation about how the gay community, LGBTQIA community is treated when they come into the courthouse. Especially, I mean, no one's gonna ask if you're gay or not. So you can obviously tell when someone is, not obviously, so, but you can tell when people are trans. So I think that is the bigger issue, is the trans community when they come in. They're not here to be a spectacle. They're not here, they're human beings and they are to be treated as such. And I think that is the issue with some of the employees, that it becomes sort of a spectacle, and that's not how you treat people. So I think that's still an issue for the court. And I think it's something that the court has to, is trying to address with training and the workshops. So that's the movement I see.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think more is needed. I mean, I'm grateful to have been a part of it, but that's such a small amount. One training in one courthouse to, I think it was all of the, the judges in housing for there. But the courthouse is so much, the court system is so much bigger than that, right? And so I definitely think that more outreach, is needed, more education. Maybe I think what could really work might be collaborating so that you have, something like Pride Alliance. Maybe collaborating with another part of the court so that you can reach a larger community. So that might be something to kind of help that happen.
Right, but I think it's also, I just want to add, it's not only the court system. It really is the practitioners that come in. So we need to train the practitioners that come in as well, because they have their own ideas and their own thought. I don't know what you call them, but I think there really has to be training with the practitioners as well on both sides, landlord and the tenants. So more than, our courthouse, the landlords, the way they treat the trans community when they come in. So I think it's not only the court, but it's also, and more has to be done as well with the practitioners.
One of the things that I've heard, especially this year, is the term gender queer. And I've seen it being used with men who present themselves as male, but they no longer want to just take on that typical stereotypical male persona, and they want to embrace their entire, the entire spectrum or how they truly feel. And it reminded me, actually, I saw just this week on the subway one day when the subway was running really well, and there was hardly anyone in there, and someone came in, maybe about 34th Street or whatever, going downtown, and the person presented themselves. They had a beard, like 6 foot tall, a blouse, and a skirt and boots. Totally comfortable in their persona, and I wanted to give a thumbs up, but the person was very much into themselves. But and that reminds me is that there have been in some places teachers now going to school, men going to school in skirts, because they know that there are people that are either genderqueer or trans, and they get bullied, and they want to be able to stand up and say, it's okay.
It's okay, exactly, yeah. A lot of times that's what it's about in society, showing up, right, and saying it's okay, right? Folks who come out like ourselves, it's okay, right? It's okay to, identify however it is, you do, but to kind of be able to let others know that.
It would take a lot of courage for me to go to work being, in something like a skirt and
that. Yeah. I mean, each person has their own comfort level, I guess, right?
What?
each person has their own, comfort level.
Right.
Right.
And
right.
now there's more men that are comfortable wearing colored nail polish. And I think that I'll have to embrace that at some point this year and just go for it, and see how that turns out. But it's kind of frightening, but it's also, I think, in some ways liberating. But it would cause a lot of questions or concerns. But I think it's important to make a stand. I think to be able to identify with the other.
Right.
Right.
And support is very important.
Anyone else have a question for our judges?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Matthew. Right.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you to you both for your time this evening. My question is a bit of a two-parter for the judges regarding prior political involvement. I was wondering, specifically for Judge Jennings, if there was any specific challenges making that transition from involvement in politics to the judicial sector, and also regarding issues about race and implicit bias. I feel like up until recently, a lot of employers and agencies would dismiss issues regarding race if employees were to talk about it as too political. So I was just wondering if any of the judges face that issue when trying to talk about racial injustice or race-related issues within the court system.
Okay, so I'll answer the political. Yeah, it's very hard for me. I love politics. It's hard not to talk about it or not to be involved, especially in local politics, especially at this time when we have the mayoral race going on. So that's very difficult. I was very involved in politics. I was very involved in, like I said, I was on the board of directors for Stonewall. I was on the board of directors for Lambda Independent Democrats. But I just got appointed the housing court judge. I was nominated to be on the Independent Democrats of Brooklyn, their board of directors. So it's very hard for me to, especially in Brooklyn politics. I don't know if you know Brooklyn politics, but it's very interesting. There's always something going on. So it was hard. And as far as discussing racism in the court, I think where we are in housing court is particularly, the majority of people that come into housing court are people of color. So, we have to talk about implicit bias. We have to talk about racism, but we don't get pushback. We have especially in the Bronx, I have a good group. We have a good group of judges that we can always, discuss what's going on and try to come up with a solution and come up with a plan on how to proceed and how to treat people. And so I think in housing courts, because we have such a large, the majority of people that come in are people of color, it's a little different from other courts.
Yeah, I'd probably say similar in terms of, the housing court, because I've of course been in housing court as well, and so that we do have colleagues who, you can sort of talk to about, those issues that come up, and have these kind of, real conversations, and brainstorm, together, which is helpful. But again, like Norma said, in some of the other courts, I don't know, maybe a little bit different, right?
Right.
Be interesting to, hear other perspectives.
Anyone else have a question?
do you feel, hi, this is Mary. Do you feel that the fact that the Manhattans decided to stop prosecuting prostitution will make it a little bit easier on the trans community because so many of them were stopped?
You broke up.
Yeah, we didn't hear everything you said.
I said, do you feel the fact that Manhattan is going to stop prosecuting prostitution will make it easier on the trans community? Because so many of them were stopped or falsely accused of that simply because of their appearance.
That I'm not really.
Right. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
that's a hard question to answer.
Yeah.
um, I mean, if they're being stopped for prostitution, and they're not prostitutes, then the question is why they're being stopped.
Right, why they stopped, right. Yeah.
So,
And didn't they pass the law that they can't do that? I mean, there was a new law that was passed, you know,
Mhm.
walking while trans.
Right,
So
Yeah. Yeah, it's terrible.
yeah, and let's hope that does stop, right, you know.
but that's a hard question for us to, you know, to
Yeah,
answer,
to
as
answer,
from the judges.
right, as
perspective.
judges, yeah.
right, yes. Yes, and certainly, you know, for LGBT community, there's, you know, from the criminal point of view, there's been, you know, the vice squads and you know, picking on LGBTQ people, but that's probably a conversation for. I mean, it's not good, but as a judge, you can't talk about things that might come before you, or eventually come before you. So we don't want to get you into trouble.
I think Judge Garland has her hand up.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Oh, okay.
Hi, everyone. It's not so much of a question. I just want to congratulate you both for all of your hard work and ascending to the bench, especially you, Juliet, because you're fairly new. Norma has been around for a little bit, but and you know, you guys are my friends, and it's just so amazing to have this conversation. And I think that in hearing you talk tonight, I think that we need to have more of these conversations. That is what is important. Because I was actually going to ask if you have any suggestions in terms of what we should be doing to raise more awareness about you know, people from the community who appear before us, especially for us who sit in housing court. But in speaking to you, I realized that we just need to have more of the conversation. And it may not necessarily be the conversation among us right here tonight, because I think that most of us who are here tonight already have those sensibilities that, you know, when we see people from the community, we are more aware
Right.
and
Right,
sensible to treating people a certain way. But like Judge Jennings mentioned earlier, I think what is important is going to be more important going forward is going to be how do we educate the other people that come into our courthouses, the attorneys, our staff members, and that's and I can't stress enough how much that's important. And this is only the beginning. We need to keep having these conversations and putting that information out there, and hearing people's stories and their personal experiences is beyond the value beyond those stories that you can't it's immeasurable. So hearing you speak tonight about your backgrounds, where you came from, how you made it to where you are, I mean, it's just so amazing. So congratulations and thank you.
Oh,
thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank
Totally.
you.
Absolutely. And what Judge Garland was saying made me think about, it's really important also to have allies, right? So, you know, of course, in this group right now, it sounds like, you know, sort of preaching to the choir, but it is important to have, you know, allies to be part of those conversations. So that when we're on these meetings, when we're on these committees, we just don't have folks that are showing up that are just, you know, LGBT AI identified, but those who are allies as well. So hearing you say that made me think about how important that is too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And thank you so much for supporting us, supporting me. And I think it is important that, you know, the court, the judges, and everyone just really be respectful to people coming into the courthouse. And like I said, no one is going to say I'm gay or straight, but you can, you know, the trans community. You know, I think this affects them more than anyone, the way they're being treated when they come into the courthouse. And I think that we have to really learn how to respect them, to see them, because a lot of people don't see them. You know, they don't see that they want to be referred to as she. They just see, oh, this is your name on here, and oh, okay, that's what I'm calling you.
Right.
No, you just have to be respectful and just see them for who they are.
And I see we have another hand raised.
Hi, it's Latea. So I don't know much about the trans community, right? But I know pre-COVID, I had such a bad experience in the HP part with HP harassment. only because the person, I think I'm pretty sure she wanted to be identified as a she. I think she was so frustrated with how they're treated in general that she kind of like took it out on us. And it wasn't that we didn't sit down, take her claim seriously, because obviously the harassment got signed for a court date, right? But she was like disruptive in the courtroom. And I am very particular about my courtroom. So if you're disrupting it, I don't care who you are. You have to either get in line and behave yourself, or you have to get out until it's time for your case to be called. But I think Christelle was right. If they felt that they were being heard, or that they were given the same respect everybody else is getting, then she might not have been so hostile to the whole process. And so I'm more in the line of, I don't understand a lot of things, but I just understand respect and just letting people be happy. So I think these conversations are good. The last, I want to say 5 or 10 years, I've seen a lot more conversations, not so much in the court, but obviously they're stepping up their game, because we do serve communities, very diverse communities. So I think it is important. And I think if we have these conversations and then community leaders have the conversations with those communities, I think that they would not so much trust, because, it's hard to trust the court system and law enforcement, but I think they would at least feel like they have a fighting chance. So I think if that person may not have had, and she may not have had a negative experience, but that's what I took from it, that she was just like ready to, fight. And it wasn't a situation where she needed to.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people get frustrated. Like you said, they don't have the experience they had before, the program you were in. And I can see how, trans folks especially can feel frustrated depending on how a staff member might have treated them, or may have seen the name, but not, seeing that they were presenting themselves differently, but still went with that name, that male name. So and I think that's what happens when people get frustrated. They kind of act out. Of course, the courtroom is the worst place to do that, but I can definitely see that happen, and have seen it happen.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you.
Great question, Latea. Thank you. But I also see that, Does someone else want to speak?
I was going to say, Louis, maybe this is a good time for you to put out the information of the Alliance
Oh,
and how
sure.
people can contact us and reach out to us.
Yes, let me do that. Give me 1 second here. I'll put it on the screen and do that there. So there's the Alliance. You can email us, and we're also on Facebook. So I'll keep that up for a minute or two. But I do know that people do get very frustrated at times in our courts, even like Supreme Court, when they don't understand the procedures. And in my particular part, we have a lot of Article 78s, and they don't know about the timeframes. They don't know. They're just thinking that they can bring it to court because they know that they have the truth. They have, the documentation. But as we all know, working in the court system, it's more than just being right. You have to follow the law, and there's a lot of nuance and all that. And when you're doing it pro se, without an attorney, it makes it more frustrating for people.
True. You gonna say
So
something?
what is your plan as far as the Alliance? Are you going to have monthly meetings? How can we get involved?
We have had monthly meetings with a small group of people, and we will probably continue that. We haven't figured out what we're going to do in the summer, if we're going to try to do a Zoom meeting. We've had meetings usually at 7:30. On this was the second Wednesday of the month we've been having meetings. So certainly anyone who wants to participate and come along, and then we'll start doing a lot more programming and doing more networking. We have
About our involvement, and if it's so, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be able to be involved. but
Right, that's what I've gotten, I've heard, and I have to do a little bit more digging. But I don't think that there's a problem for judges to be involved, court users, I mean, court employees.
okay.
Okay.
So, but yes, um, I was just looking, I think Judge Mendelson had just left.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, she said that thanks for a wonderful program. That was nice. She typed it in the chat.
The what?
She said thanks for a wonderful program. She typed it in
Oh,
the chat.
okay, yes, and I found out how in the future we can do this like during the weekday, during, daytime, and we can get having it as one of the programs from the diversity, Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and having it during the weekday as more of a program. Is Matt still on? Matt, do you want to, we probably should have done a quick thing of your event that the commission is doing.
Hey, it's great to thank you for giving me that opening, Lewis. And I just want to say thank you to everybody, for all the organizers tonight, and to judges Jennings and Howard. Thank you so much for doing this,
Thank you.
and doing so many interviews and different things the past few weeks and months. I hope you haven't felt bombarded with all the requests, but
We appreciate the support. We appreciate
yeah.
it.
The last week in June, we have two events. One of them is a tribute to Judge Feinman, who passed away in March,
Yes.
sort of tragically and unexpectedly. And we've got sort of a wonderful group of speakers, including the Chief Judge, and that'll be streamed live on YouTube. And on the next day, on the 23rd, we have Congressman Mondaire Jones and Richie Torres doing a joint interview with Justice Frank Perry. That program is called Leadership and Legislation, and it's going to be about their bios and things that they're working on in Washington, D.C. They're the first Black and gay congressman in American history, or openly gay, I should say.
Right.
And so we're really looking forward to those events coming up in 2 weeks. So join us if you can for those as well.
Great.
All right, great.
Great.
And hopefully, in the ranks of judges, hopefully come November, we'll have another, member of the LGBT community, because Queens has never had a gay judge.
Wow.
And there's one running, so.
And but I always say this, we've had a couple gay judges, because in Brooklyn we've had Battaglia, but we've never had one of color. I don't think we've ever had, I think in Manhattan they have one of color, and Brooklyn they've never had one of color, which is interesting.
Yes, we need to figure out, strategize, and try to see how we can get more judges of color that are in the LGBT community.
Yes.
And especially, I mean, are there any trans judges?
No.
In some other states, I think there's 4 in the whole nation, but
Wow.
none in
Oh,
New York.
okay.
Mhm.
And I was trying to do some research to see if there were any trans attorneys. I'm sure that there are,
Oh,
but
there
there's,
are. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely there
yes.
are. Yes, there are.
but there's none that are like, this is the person, I guess, unless you're in as an attorney in those fields, who they are.
Right. But there definitely are.
But there's,
That,
I think
yeah.
Yetta Kirkland identifies as trans. And
Oh, okay.
Yetta's been around for a long time.
Okay, good. So thank you very much, both of you, for taking time out of your evening to be with us.
Oh, thanks so much for
Thank
having
you,
us.
inviting
Yeah.
us.
Thanks everyone for
Thank you.
joining tonight. So
Good
thank you.
conversation with everybody, So thank you, everybody that showed up.
Yes. So happy Pride, everyone.
Happy
Yes,
Pride.
happy Pride.
Please
Absolutely.
Yes.
on your
This
mailing.
is a really nice event. Thank you, judges.
Yeah.
Okay.
Louis, before we go, can you put up the information one more time? I see people asking in the chat room for it, like how to contact you.
Can everyone see
Thank you.
that?
Great.
Is this the Facebook one?
That's
Or the regular one? Okay.
Yeah.
This is the Facebook one.
Because you also have Facebook.
Facebook
Okay.
too, right?
Thanks again so much, judges, for speaking. It was this is a really nice event. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It was
Thank
good
you.
to see everybody.
And I hope to see you at more.
Yeah.
Everyone at more.
Exactly.
Yes, Felice.
Yes.
Thank you. Yes.
Definitely.
Thank you very much for inviting me and enjoy our month. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Yes.
no
Bye,
problem.
Carlos.
Okay, thank you.
Carlos.
Have
All
a
right,
good
everyone.
night.
Happy
Bye, everyone.
Pride
Good
and thank
night.
you.
Thanks, Christelle. Thank you,
Yeah.
Taya.
Nice to see you, Louis.
Yes, thank you. for
I know we didn't get to have our dinner last year.
No,
Maybe this year we'll do it.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, good night all.
Have a good night.
Hey, good